I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles. Welcome to Stand Up and Holler. On today's edition, we're going to go over the 2025 Read and Reaction Preview Magazine, which has been on sale now for a couple weeks. Listen, y'all, we didn't fully intend to disappear for 6 months from this show, Will, but between both of us pulled some double duty at work, I've been working some 80+ hour weeks at the job, and Will's been quite busy himself on top of preparing the magazine. And Will's already got 4 kids and coaches baseball, so he probably doesn't want to hear any of my garbage. But listen, it's just been a busy spring, and we wanted to dig in and make sure that magazine was right. And so that's been the priority all spring. So that's why there's been a bit of an absence from the show. We will pick up closer to the season, so this is not gonna we're not gonna jump back into doing regular episodes right away. But we did want to check in. We want to talk about the magazine. In my opinion, I do think it's our strongest one yet. This is something that we have a much better feel for here in year four, Will, than we did in year one. When it was experimental, we were writing a lot of articles. Maybe the flow wasn't quite what it is, but this one, I think we capture a ton of topics in a brief amount of pages. I mean, it's still 70+ pages of Gator content here. I believe it's 72 pages this edition, but we got DJ Lagway on the cover here. You can have it on Amazon, printed at the nearest Amazon printing facility near you. So it comes pretty quickly. Well, we worked with Amazon last year. We really enjoyed it. How's it going, man? Been a minute.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, so, it's funny because this is, I think, the best magazine we've done, but it's also the best Gator team that we've had since the magazine came out, right? So,
Yeah.
not only do you get to read the magazine and sort of dream about what could be, and I think we're generally pretty optimistic in the magazine, even over the last couple of years. But let's be honest, nobody expected Florida to win the SEC last year. Nobody expected Florida to compete for a playoff berth last year, and certainly Florida didn't accomplish any of those goals last year. But those are the goals in front of the Gators this year in 2025. And so to be able to write about that, to be able to talk about that, I think was really fun because of the improvement we saw, because of the 4 game winning streak at the end of the year, because of DJ Lagway and what he showed us and all those sorts of things. So look, I mean, here's our push, right? We provide content for basically free all year long, whether it's over at Read and Reaction or whether it's on YouTube. And certainly, I think we've really committed ourselves to making sure that this is a comprehensive preview. We would appreciate it. We got over 3,000 subscribers here on YouTube. We get typically 1,200 to 1,500 people listening to each of these podcasts when they come out. We would really appreciate it. This is our one push to fund that free content we give away all year long. So you go to readandreaction.com/mag. That's readandreaction.com/MAG. It's $21.99 over on Amazon if you want a hard copy. It's $15.99 for the digital version. You can have that in your inbox in 5 seconds if you go over there right now. So that's www.readandreaction.com/MAG. And please leave a review on Amazon if you like the magazine. That really helps us out. Certainly, if you see our advertisements on Facebook, Instagram, or X, let us know so that we know where our reach is going. And then, obviously, if you want to share the posts that we have on those forums as well, we'd really appreciate it. But look, I mean, Gator Nation is a family. It's always been a family. It's one of the things we love about it. In fact, there's a lot of that in the magazine. One of the things that I did was actually interview a father-son duo that hosts a tailgate, and even when they're not there, they're able to host tailgates, and that's one of the stories that's in the magazine. So, we would really, really, really appreciate it if you got the $20 and you're willing to go out and support us. This is the one thing we do all year to really fundraise for what we're doing all year long. And there's a lot of stuff that you've come to love and enjoy from Read Reaction in there as well, right? We've got the breakdowns where we've got film studies where you can go directly to YouTube clips and watch the play while you're seeing the diagram on the page there. And then there's a bunch of stuff sort of looking at DJ Lagway. There's a lot of stuff looking at the defense. There's even a spot on special teams. And then Nick's specialty, the middle eight, looking at the last 4 minutes, the first half, the first 4 minutes, the second half, and sort of where Florida's been. I mean, one of the things I think is most impressive is Nick went and looked at the entire season and charted every single play that Florida went through so that we could draw conclusions and look at that data and try to really glean something from that. You're not going to see that data in the magazine, but that's the kind of comprehensive coverage that you get in the magazine. Because when we start talking about, oh, DJ Lagway had this many explosive plays on this down, that Lagway compared to Mertz or Lagway compared to somebody else, like that's all coming from a pretty extensive look at what was going on with the Gators. So there's no play for the season that one of us has not watched, definitely, to bring you this 2025 preview. So we're excited about it. So again, if you go over to readandreaction.com/MAG, that's readandreaction.com/MAG. If you go to Amazon, you type in 2025 Read and Reaction Gator preview, it'll pop up over there too. So you can order it there. But we appreciate your support. We appreciate everybody listening to the stuff we do provide for free. But again, if you got $20 and can support us, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, I will. One of the things that I get a little self-conscious about with our content is like, do we just beat people over the head with like numbers and facts sometimes without telling stories? Some like in some instances, right? I think overall we could tell a good story, but like I do think this magazine it was our best version yet of being able to kind of go through and not only tell the story of a very interesting 2024 season. It wasn't a result that, certainly we don't go around hanging banners for like 8-5 seasons and Gasparilla Bowl appearances around here. But from a pure fan standpoint, where it started versus where it ended, the ups and downs throughout the year, an emerging freshman quarterback that looks like he can really, as Will asked on the cover here, is DJ Lagway the best quarterback in the SEC? It sounds like something a homer would say, Will, but the numbers back it up. The numbers back it up. And certainly we do try to appeal to a little bit of a homer element. You're right in the Florida Gators magazine. We're two guys, we love the Gators, but we also want to come at it with a lot of facts too. So there's a lot of charts, a lot of data in here, but we try to tell that story. And I think I used the phrase more than once in the magazine, the tale of two seasons, where man, it didn't just look different with DJ Lagway. It was completely different, and we got the numbers in the story to back it up in this magazine.
Yeah, it's funny because we sort of storyboarded we always storyboard the magazine, and then you get mad at me because I go way off kilter and find other stuff that doesn't necessarily fit within the story. But this one actually, one of the reasons we actually, I think, released about a week later than we anticipated, and one of the reasons is maybe 2 weeks before we needed to have it, all set up for the printer. I reached out to you and I'm like, hey, the flow isn't right. It's like we need to change it. And so like we complete and you're the one who does all the typesetting and all that sort of stuff. So it's like I know you were sitting there cursing me when it happened, but I think it really sets the stage. I mean, if you look at the first, like I would say first quarter of the magazine, it's recruiting. It's what's Florida done on the recruiting trail. How have they improved the seventh rated recruiting class in 2025 to sort of come into this year? Obviously, all the hype around the 5-star wide receivers coming in. Then
Mhm.
the next part of the magazine is 2024. What happened? Why did it happen? Offense, defense, special teams in some capacity. What's going on there? And then the back half of the magazine is really talking about what can we expect in 2025, and so sort of it goes roster construction, what happened in 2024, and then how do those two things come together to really build into what we hope and what I think we're kind of predicting is going to be a really, really interesting season and good season for Florida. So we always do this thing at the end of the magazine. It's always a win, loss, or toss where we're picking, do we expect Florida to win the game definitively? Do we expect them to lose the game definitively? Or is it a toss up? And last year, I would say it was probably like 2-2-7 or something in terms of win losses and tosses, right?
Lots of
Like
toss-ups last
like
year, right?
we had losses for
You weren't
Georgia and
quite
Texas.
willing to commit to the win in some instances, but you didn't want to write it off as a loss either,
Yeah,
right?
and this
Yeah.
year I think both you and I have like three toss-ups in the entire season, which
Mhm.
tells you something about like what we think. Now, look, one of us might have 9 wins and one of us might have six in that win, loss, and toss. But we're not expecting, like we're pretty sure with what we've got.
Right.
on the field, assuming that there aren't like catastrophic injuries and those sorts of things. And, obviously with the return of some of the guys on defense, that becomes even more encouraging about what this Florida team can be. So, look, I think the seminal moment for me last year, I talk about it in the first page in the magazine, is bringing Max down for my 9-year-old son, now 10, bringing Max down for the LSU game. He's really the good luck charm. We got to get him there early to make sure things start out the right way. But, look, that LSU game, everything flipped and everything turned around. And, it's one of those things where, a few years ago in what would have been 2018, Joe Burrow, like the last 3 or 4 games of that year for LSU was awesome, even though he was sort of a pedestrian for the first, 3 quarters of the year. And then he was awesome the last 3 or 4 games. That carries over into 2019. That LSU offense can't be stopped.
Right.
We'll see. We'll see. I mean, obviously, I think Lagway was better than Burrow was in Burrow's first real college football. I mean, he got a can of corn there or a cup of coffee there at Ohio State, but his first real college football experience, Burrow sort of, not great, sort of average and middling. I think Lagway was better than that. So now the question is, sophomore year, what's coming? Like, is there an avalanche coming where all of a sudden Florida's going to have an unstoppable quarterback? And it's exciting because we can ask about that, right? I mean, we all kind of like, I think there was some debate over whether Kyle Trask between 2019 and 2020 could take a step forward. It was pretty clear 2 or 3 games into that 2020 season that he had, but there's no reason to believe Lagway shouldn't be able to take a step forward. And so, not only, I mean, we've got stuff in here where we're talking about Lagway being the best quarterback in the SEC already returning, but there's another level. And so
Right.
that's really exciting, obviously, coming into the year.
Well, one thing I can guarantee is he'll have twice as many legs to play on. That's going to be one of the most exciting things. He did all that on one leg down the stretch. It's unbelievable. Shit, I mean, that Florida State, you think about that Florida State clip, right? Where he guys all over him, he just sheds him. Like it's not like that was on one leg. He's shedding a guy, a defensive lineman on one leg. That was unbelievable. But
Yeah, hopefully he's hung out with Peyton Manning a little bit this offseason and learns how to just duck and hit the ground when
yeah,
those guys are coming in. It's awesome when he does it. Those are really cool plays. I just want him to get down, stay healthy, and then beat Georgia, man.
yeah, absolutely. Well, let's start here. We talked about early on with the roster construction we went through. I think one of the most encouraging things about it, we talked about on Gators Breakdown last week here, is that Florida, obviously with you and Dave have harped on the recruiting for years. Like, I mean, not that you guys are exclusively doing it, but you guys have kind of focused on that as the way to uh, really especially catch Georgia, right? I think a lot of the problems we've had, and like I even said this too, like there was a lot of things around Dan Mullen's exit at Florida, but I do think Georgia rising into the monster it's become over the last several years to the point where they're winning championships and everything. I think as they were rising, it was clear they were going in that direction. It's pretty tough to watch your main rival do that while you're also struggling. So I think that carries some extra weight with some of the angst that's been felt around the Florida program over the last several years. And to just feel like you're 100 miles behind Georgia is just never a place that we should ever be as a program. And the good news that we're finding from last year, the way we not only finished up strong, but in state, I took a look at I just cut up a segment of the top 20 players in state. And from 2013 to 2023, Alabama and Georgia came into the state of Florida and they recruited at almost a 40% clip amongst the top 20 players in state during that stretch. And in the last two cycles, they've combined for four total in the last two cycles. Last year, Alabama got two, Georgia zero. Florida had five last year. And that's the first time that Florida has had that kind of number. Normally they get one or two of the top 20. They landed five top 20 prospects in state, which sounds like something they should be doing every year, but it hasn't been that way for a while. Those are the types of numbers that Alabama and Georgia were putting up a few years ago. And to not only see Florida rise up, take five of the top 20 prospects in 2025, but also see Georgia take zero, Alabama only take two. If we can keep that type of momentum going, that's huge. That's a huge flip in state, taking care of your backyard, something that we have preached for years with this Florida program, and Billy Napier seems to have gotten the job done last cycle in state.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's still a lot of work to be done. You got to repeat it. You got to do it multiple years in a
Right.
row. Seventh is still seventh, and probably
Nationally.
like
Yeah.
fifth in the SEC.
Right.
So, especially with the SEC expansion, so there's still a lot of work to be done, right? I mean,
Not
and that's
perfect, but that is a sign of progress, is it not?
sure, absolutely. And
Yeah.
so I think that, look, the overarching theme of the magazine is that we should be optimistic about where the program is going. But a lot of that optimism comes from some of the five-star guys who've come in. So that's the other part of it is you start thinking about the elite prospects who've really started to show out on the field already. And in fact, on the defensive side of the ball, LJ McCray is somebody who hasn't really shown out like considerably on the field yet. So there's still some room to grow there too. I think the recruiting stuff. So I have an article later in the magazine where I'm looking at how the SEC was won, and it's interesting because 2 years ago the SEC was won like all the winning records were really tied to quarterback play. It was guys like Jaden Daniels, guys like Jackson Dart, really elite guys like Carson Beck was really good 2 years ago for Georgia. So those guys really sort of drove the narrative of the conference. And the problem is you had really good quarterback play on teams that were really good. And it turns out that it kind of flipped last year that Georgia had substandard quarterback play. Texas had substandard quarterback play. You had LSU with substandard quarterback play, and you got much better quarterback play at places like Vanderbilt and places like South Carolina and places like even Tennessee with Nico got better quarterback play. A&M with Marcel Reed got pretty good quarterback play. So what that did was that compressed everything. And so since I suspect when you look at the returning quarterbacks, and we've highlighted that in the magazine, when you look at the guys who are returning, I think we're going to see more of a 2024 SEC season than we saw a 2023 one. And so, with that being said, what that means is that quarterback play covers a lot of talent sins. Florida's really got, and I think what you're really hinting at is Florida's closed that talent gap, both from the front and the back, right? I mean, so from the backside, they've closed it by really making sure that they're bringing in guys in the state, and from the front end, they've really closed it from the fact that Tyreek Sepp and Caleb Banks are coming back, and those sorts of things. And so, when you factor that in, I think they've kind of the talent gap has compressed a little bit, but the other thing is that there's not as wide a quarterback gap as there's been the last few years. And so if DJ Lagway can really give Florida a major advantage at that specific position, now you even if there's a talent gap, you've got the opportunity to win every game. And so Florida's recruiting isn't where we need it to be long term to be a behemoth like Georgia was, or Georgia is, or a behemoth like Alabama was under Saban, but certainly the quarterback play covers a lot of those sins. And so there's enough talent here to make a significant playoff run. Now, you need some injury luck and you need some other things. And I think realistically, though, you can say that about just every SEC team, right? I mean, Gunnar Stockton can't be awful at Georgia if they want to get where they want to go. Arch Manning is going to have to be as good as he was in his flashes last year. But look, he couldn't beat out Quinn Ewers, and Ewers wasn't playing very well. So, but I mean, I'm not scared of Zach Calzada. I'm not scared of Austin Simmons. I'm not scared of Joey Aguiar. I'm not scared of Tommy Castellanos at Florida State. So even if you look at the guys who are on Florida's schedule from a quarterback perspective, Florida's going to have an advantage at that position, assuming they can keep Lagway healthy. And so, what you're highlighting in terms of the talent they're bringing in from the state becomes doubly important because now you're keeping that talent in along with the core you've already got.
Well, obviously, Alabama's going through a transition. Another major change, too. Another thing that might have worked out in Florida's favor ultimately for all the disaster we've talked about around NIL with the Rashada situation, a few other things early on. It really looks like NIL has benefited this program in a lot of ways, and it looks like not just Florida, but from those top you talked about the Alabamas with Saban or Georgia with Smart in the early 2020s here. They were able to compile talent and even like the second, third string guys are all getting drafted a couple years later. Like it was unreal the level of talent that was circulating through these programs year after year after year, and it kept building and stacking on each other. You see these guys get picked off little by little. Maybe they're going for a bigger check. Maybe they're going because a coach left and they're able to go follow a coach to another school. We saw that with Texas A&M last year, where a lot of guys on the defense had a few guys go pop over to A&M. We saw it this year, an up and coming player. I think he got some freshman award in the spring. Gregory Smith pops out to go to North Carolina. I mean, we won't know what he is at Florida here, but he's a good prospect and he's up at North Carolina now. It's tough to hold on to that level of depth anymore. And I think last year with the expansion of the college football playoff to where the season's actually longer, so there's more wear and tear. You have to lean on the depth, and there's just some teams. Georgia's playing in the playoff without Carson Beck, right? You're going to face those injuries. Are we going to see the powerhouses dominate to the degree we saw with Saban and with the early 2020s Georgia Bulldogs anymore? Are we going to see the NIL thing keep it a little more spread out to where a Vanderbilt can come in and now compete on the right Saturday with Alabama?
So I think that's one of the interesting questions that's still out there to answer, right? And I think we've got a couple of years worth of data. We've certainly looked at it in the magazine. You've got an article specifically talking about NIL and general managers. I've got an article talking about the transfer portal and what you can expect to get from a production perspective coming out of the portal. But we got to recognize that's only a couple of years worth of data, and we don't
Right.
really know, right? So, like I said earlier, two
But
years
based
ago,
on early trends, based on what you've seen
well,
early on,
so based on what I've seen early on, is that I actually think long term this is probably going to NIL is probably going to help the big boys because I think the big boys are going to target quarterbacks and they're going to bring in the quarterbacks that will help differentiate them versus the talent that they had. Now, the problem with that is if you got a bunch of five-star guys in the waiting, well, those guys now have to find a different place if you bring in a quarterback, right? So Carson Beck transfers into Miami, and anybody who was behind him, if they were a high-profile guy, are going to go someplace else. And so
so we're not going to
um,
see a quarterback room with Jalen Hurts, Tua, and Mac Jones
I mean,
anymore.
I would suspect that's not something that you would see again, and you could say the same thing about Alabama's wide receiver room. But also, I mean, look, I think if you look at Florida's team last year, we went into that season saying that Asa Turner and DJ Douglas were going to be keys at the safety position, and it turns out Triquez Bridges was probably the most important transfer that they brought in
Hmm.
last year,
Yep.
and so stacking does not just exist within high school recruiting anymore. It also exists within the transfer portal. And so um, I think the early returns are, and we highlight this in the magazine, the early returns are that you rarely miss when you bring a guy in the transfer portal. Like they're not always stars, but you rarely miss. So if you have a giant hole, you are able to close that giant gaping hole with at least average play. And so that's what the transfer portal, I think, brings is that a team like Arkansas, who might have had three or four just gaping holes, can conceivably go out and cover up those holes. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means if they get Alabama on the road, if their quarterback happens to play better, or if Alabama's quarterback plays terribly, it's not just something where, oh yeah, the left guard is a mess and we'll be able to pressure the quarterback for Arkansas all day long. It's like, no, you've been able to close that gap. You now have adequate play at that position. And so you're able to get the playoff. And especially, I think what we're probably going to see, like my guess would be that what we're going to see is a lot more variability on the road. That when a team like Arkansas gets somebody at home, when a team like Vanderbilt gets somebody at home,
We saw that with
or
Tennessee, who made the playoff. We saw that with Alabama, who made the playoff
well, I
last
mean,
year.
if you think about Florida
Or no,
making the
no, Alabama did not make the playoff, obviously,
well,
but
and if you think about making
losing to
well,
Vandy.
but Alabama lost three games, and those
Losing
three
to
games were
Vandy
all on the
cost
road.
them the playoff, right? Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
those were all road games, right?
Right,
And if you look at Florida last year, I mean, it's I don't think it's a coincidence that that run started LSU at home, Ole Miss at home,
right,
and
right.
then you have the games on the back end that going to Florida State, but Florida State was awful last year, right? In the game against Tulane, so those like they were able to build up momentum by having an advantage by being in that stadium. I think we're going to see stadium and road games really play a role over the next few years because I think it compresses a little bit, assuming you don't get a differentiator at quarterback. Now, this is the one caveat, right? So Arch Manning decided to sit a couple of years behind Quinn Ewers. If Manning had decided to transfer to Alabama, we'd be looking at them going, "Wow, crap." Like if he's as good as we think he could be, then Alabama's going to be. Alabama has a talent advantage. There's no doubt. Georgia has a talent advantage. There's no doubt. But Gunnar Stockton and I don't even know who Alabama's quarterback is. Whoever's backing up, whoever was the backup to Jalen
Are
Milroe.
we looking at Ty Simpson right now?
Yeah, I mean,
Potentially?
we're talking about completely unproven guys at that position, and
Yeah.
that is what compresses things. So if the big boys figure out how to target quarterbacks who are good rather than looking for game managers. So this is where Miami made a mistake, right? They went out and got Cam Ward last year, and Ward was somebody with significant upside potential. But also, he didn't have this profile that made me go, oh, this guy's going to win the Heisman Trophy. But then he goes out and he just plays unbelievably, right? Because he hits the upside. I think Carson Beck has very little upside. I think Carson Beck is sort of he is who he is. He had a really good year 2 years ago where he was like borderline good. I wouldn't call him borderline elite. I would have said he was good on a good team. And then last year I thought he was average to slightly below average on a good team. What are we going to get at Miami? Probably the same thing. So is Miami going to be outstanding this year? I don't think so because I don't think they have the talent around Beck to overcome somebody who's sort of just Jake Frommy, right? It's like he's like Jake Fromm on Georgia wins 11 games. Jake Fromm on Vanderbilt wins 4 games. And that's sort of the reality, right? You play to your talent if your quarterback's kind of average. And again, I think that's where Florida really shines is that Lagway should be significantly above average this year, which means even if you think Florida's a 7 or 8 win team with a guy like Graham Mertz or somebody like that at quarterback, is Lagway good for 2 or 3 wins? I think that's what we're betting on, and that's what we're really hoping coming into the year.
Yeah, we took a look at a lot of the angles around the offense too. I know there's an article that I wrote about first down play calling and maybe the lack of aggressiveness that we've seen at times. It's also we haven't had the type of weapon that Lagway proved to be in different spots last year, but did we are we going to use him to the degree that he should be used, right? That's a question we ask in there that we answer. But Will, it's obviously the headline article. I do want to mention it here. You said the title of the article is why DJ Lagway is already the best quarterback in the SEC. Give me the movie trailer version of this article without giving it all away, because obviously that's the type of headline you might expect in the Florida Gators preview magazine. But tell me why this is not just a Florida Gator guy talking about DJ Lagway being good and why you can back that up.
It's because Lagway averaged 10 yards per attempt last year, and folks don't average 10 yards per attempt without being good. What it suggests is you can go downfield really, really effectively. Nobody who's a Gator fan, that's not a newsflash, right? He was incredibly good going deep. But most of the time, quarterbacks sort of build from the line of scrimmage out, right? If you look at a guy like Garrett Nussmeier, he's somebody who relatively below average and really bad last year going deep. But when he had to do intermediate to short throws, was very, very effective. But it turns out those short throws, the little bubble screens and the little hitches and those sorts of things might move you down the field, but they lead to 3 points a lot. And so what Lagway really was able to do last year, and the reason Florida's offense felt different when he was in there, it was very much boom or bust, right? It was a
Hmm.
lot of 3-and-outs when he was out there. You watched them all, but it was also a lot of throws to Elijah Badger down to the 1 yard line, and then Jaden Baugh punching it in on the next play is because Lagway can hit those big plays, because when the defense decides to blitz him and gives him one-on-one coverage, he can make them pay. That's the thing that kind of comes last. Like if you think about it, what do you do to a rookie quarterback? You try to harass him. You try to get pressure. You bring blitzes from all over the place, and you make the game speed up. That didn't happen to Lagway. When they blitzed him, he killed them. In fact, the way they slowed him down was they started dropping into zones. And because he couldn't run, because he only had one leg, now it was you got to read the defense, find the holes, and get the ball in there. Now, we have an entire section in here about how to defeat that sort of drop eight coverage in those zones. And you can do that. And the supposition is you can do it with a bunch of different play calling type of things. But the reality is that the thing that usually stymies a true freshman quarterback was a place where Lagway excelled. And so from a potential perspective, it says, okay, this is somebody who can build into an elite prospect. But even then, he had a QB rating of up over 150. he had, like I said, he averaged 10 yards per attempt, and he didn't take a ton of sacks, even though he couldn't move. And so one of the things that I really focus in on is how many rushing attempts, basically yards per attempt that a quarterback has on the ground, because those yards per attempt translate into, is he taking a bunch of sacks and killing drives? And Lagway, even on one leg, had positive rushing yards for last year. And so, even if you think about the LSU game, the kid could barely move. And the key play was something where the LSU defensive ends are coming around the corner. He has to step up into the pocket. He steps up into the pocket, rips a throw down to Badger down to the 1 yard line. And that's how Florida ends up getting ahead in that game and eventually puts it away. Think about the same thing in the Tennessee game. I mean, he was awful in that game, but fourth down, the defense sort of converged upon where he would have been. He was able to step up in the pocket and deliver the ball in a situation where I mean, hell, if you think about Tennessee, the game, what was it, against Oklahoma, where Nico like ran out of bounds instead of throwing the ball on a fourth
Arkansas.
down. Arkansas, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So it couldn't have been Oklahoma. They didn't win any games last year. So,
They beat
but
Alabama.
no, that's true. But so my point is that when you actually look at the film, there is stuff that he does that is special and stuff that he does that other quarterbacks don't. And then I look at the returning quarterbacks in the SEC, and who is there? Right?
It's a
Like
great point. That's
to
a
say
great
he's
point.
the best quarterback in the SEC isn't that big a stretch when you look at who's coming back. It is a just smorgasbord of average and new. And so, I mean, look, anybody who's listened to me for any length of time knows that I am not a Garrett Nussmeier fan. Um, Definitely not a Carson Beck fan. Arch Manning, okay. And I know Beck's at Miami, but still, I'm sort of going down Florida's schedule here. So you got LSU, Garrett Nussmeier. You got Miami, Carson Beck. You got Texas, Arch Manning. I think he's going to be good. You got Marcel Reed at A&M. You got Blake Shapen at Mississippi State, Gunnar Stockton at Georgia, Zach Calzada at Kentucky. Like he was bad when he was at Texas A&M. You know, Austin Simmons at Ole Miss, Joey Aguiar, the transfer into Tennessee because they lost Nico. That's a downgrade. And then Tommy Castellanos at FSU. So at least on Florida's schedule, the only place where I say Lagway might be worse is Manning. And that one I think is really an open question. But, look, I mean, last year, Jackson Dart, very good. He's gone. Jalen Milrow, pretty good. He's gone. Then you got guys like Thorne at Auburn. You got Cook at Missouri. You had Beck at Georgia. You had Ewers at Texas. You had Vandegrift at Kentucky. You had Arnold at Oklahoma. I mean, these are just like they're not good quarterbacks.
And
So
Will
again,
has these numbers in the article backing up this here as to why he's making this claim. All the numbers are in the article, and I do think that's one thing that we do pretty well in the magazine too, is it is Florida Gators centric, but we do talk about things in the scope of the conference and in the schedule that they're playing
well,
each year. We do that in each magazine, so
you
I'm
have to.
saying
It
that.
matters, right?
Right.
Like if
So it's
if
not just
Florida
isolated. We got a lot of SEC analysis in here as well.
Well, if Florida was in the ACC, we'd be predicting them to go 11-1. So, it does matter
That
whether you're
road game at
playing.
NC State just makes me nervous, man. The other article that you had written that I really enjoyed here, and again, some of the questions from last year, right? Was Lagway actually as good as we think he was? Yeah, the answer is clear. Yes. One of the best quotes to end that thought on the article, though, Will, that you had in there. People say, wow, he looked good for a freshman. No, he just looked good, period.
Yeah,
Don't say he was good for a freshman. He was just
it
good,
was good.
period, no matter how you stack them up. And so we have the numbers. It's not just so you're around the water cooler with your friends and you need to pump up DJ Lagway even more than you probably are right now. Like we'll give you the numbers to back that up. But the other thing too, the defense. Was that a fluke at the end of the season? Was it just a few good games? I mean, even you look at the LSU game, if you go with the drive chart with both LSU and Ole Miss, LSU held the ball for a spectacular amount of time. So did Ole Miss had a bunch of drives down deep in our territory, and they would either go for it or just not convert. We held at the right time in both of those games, but you break it down very well in this article that you don't see this as a fluke based on what you saw, and you saw Ron Roberts' fingerprints all over that. You called the article the Ron Roberts resurrection, which say that three times fast, but. Austin Armstrong, obviously now at Houston, joined by special teams coach Chris Couch
Woohoo!
recently. Uh, I think it's clear. I think it's clear that there was a definitive impact made by Roberts down the stretch, and you do a good job explaining why.
Yeah, thanks, man. I think, look, the thing that I highlighted in last year's magazine was that Ron Roberts learned some stuff when he went to Baylor to work under Dave Aranda. And the question with him coming in was that influence going to show up in Florida's defense last year? So there was a lot of discussion about Florida having more competitive practices during their first bye week and and all sorts of stuff like that. But I'll tell you, we brought we've got some stats in here that suggest that there was a flip from that first bye, the game before the first bye week to the first game after that first bye week. Florida changed something schematically. Now, part of that change was to protect their personnel. And so when you ask me whether the defensive change was real, I will say yes, they changed their philosophy, and that philosophy freed up some things that I think they'll be able to build on in 2025. I also think that philosophy was necessary to cover some of the holes that they had. And so I think the question coming into 2025 is going to be, can some of those young guys especially step into those holes and make sure that they're able to do things that are a little bit more multiple than what they did last year? Because let's be honest, the second half against Georgia, they weren't able to get a stop. The whole game against Texas, they weren't able to get a stop. And even if you look at the LSU and Ole Miss games, like there are worlds where Dart makes a couple of completions in that Ole Miss game and the outcome is different. There are worlds where Garrett Nussmeier hits a couple of deep balls and that game's different. Now, the good news is they're playing against Garrett Nussmeier, so he didn't hit any of the deep shots. And the good news is that they made Jackson Dart cry after he threw like 75 interceptions. And that's, look, I mean, all credit to the Florida defense for getting that job done. The havoc that the defensive line started to put out in the last 4 or 5 games also very much connected with the benefit that they were getting there. But there is a definitive schematic change, and we outline that and then outline what it means for 2025 because there are some things specifically at linebacker that Ron Roberts has his fingerprints all over. And so, we got to like we'll talk about what he did schematically, and then if you get a little bit further into the linebacker section, we even break it down further in terms of what that means for 2025.
Yeah, and again, that's another section we have with a couple of those QR codes where you can actually scan the magazine with your phone, watch the play, and then read along with Will's analysis here. I'll try to flip to one of these pages so we can see it. But while I'm doing that, Will, part of the thing that we loved about the Florida offseason is seeing the, and again, this is maybe a new feature in the NIL era. I'm not sure pre-NIL you see guys like Tyreek Sapp or Caleb Banks coming back here for another year. Like these guys, these are the types of guys that could go out to the NFL and get drafted. You saw that with an Ohio State team that went through the playoffs, and they definitely leaned on that defensive front against some top tier competition down the stretch. You had guys like Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau down the stretch that both of those guys could have been playing on Sundays in a previous era, but with the money you can make coming back for one more year, maybe it's worth staying in college instead of going to be a fourth round pick or a fifth round pick. You might make more money playing on Saturdays than you do Sundays for a year, and that's worth it. I think that's going to be a gigantic part, and that's what we have a section called roster construction, because it's not just recruiting anymore. There's a whole element of keeping talent that from going, because I think it's you can influence that more than you used to be able to. I think you can influence it a little more directly and have it make more sense. I get this a good this is the insert section here. If you see here, you can go here and do a QR code. Um, Watch the play, read along. We have which figure it is. We have all the figures labeled, so it's easy to track. No commercials on there because it goes to our YouTube page as well. We did that the first year. There's some commercials, so we made sure that there's no commercials on any of those going to some random YouTube links. They are
Now,
all
I
on our page with commercial free. But I Will puts these together every year, and I think they're the absolute highlight of our magazine because I don't see that type of thing anywhere else. And I've seen some books since do it. There's a couple out there that do something similar, but I I think Will does a great job with that. And there's an inserts section too, where you break down how Florida can more effectively use inserts in their offense. And I think that's a really unique section that I think people will enjoy. If you're a total football nerd, you're really going to enjoy that section because Will's got NFL highlights. Even the Army Black Knights make an appearance, and if you're a college football junkie, watching those Army offenses sometimes, and look, they're not my favorite offenses. I'm not one of those guys who likes to pretend like the triple option is one of my favorite things to watch. But sometimes you're looking for something to watch. Is it fun to pop in for 15 minutes and watch something like that? Yeah, I think so. We got the Army Black Knights making an appearance in this magazine as well. So, Will, you covered a lot of ground on that section. Good job.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, look, I think you glossed over a section that you put together. Actually, I think you've glossed over two sections you put together. One is you looked at the personnel distributions that Florida had, and it's interesting. One of the questions that you're asking is, so they were in 11 and 12 personnel like 99% of the time last year,
Yeah.
and one of the questions you're asking is, hey, they've got all these recruits at wide receiver. Is it time to open things up and start going four wide and five wide more often as opposed to having tight ends in there? And does Lagway allow you to do that, right? You go five wide, it becomes really difficult to play some of those zones that cause problems for Lagway. So that's one way to scheme around that. And then the other thing I think you should talk a little bit about is the returning guys, right? Continuity makes a difference. It's not just Banks, it's not just Sapp. Florida in terms of what they're returning, and really this has been Napier's vision ever since he got here, right? Is that he was going to have continuity. And I think, look, I've certainly been impatient because that hasn't been the way people have won in the past. But I think going into 2025, that's a real advantage. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about that and sort of what you found.
Well, that's why I think it's interesting too, because I think you picked up on a lot of trends with the way college football was set up, and it's just so much has changed in the last few years. Those trends are going to be out there. It's like you said, I don't think we have enough data to analyze them either. I think it's just you kind of can make some general observations of what's going on, but I do think the NIL era creates that unique opportunity to build those rosters, build that continuity where you have to accept, in some senses, you're going to lose about half of your recruiting class right off the jump. I mean, even the biggest schools, we put that in the magazine last year. We showed how many people, how many players actually make it through the full 4 years in a program anymore. It's crazy. It's a crazy number that end up transferring. I mean, nearly half get out of there at some point. And I don't know about you, Will, but that's it hasn't killed my interest in high school recruiting, especially amongst the really high profile guys, but it really has dampened it slightly. Obviously, you want to see those guys come in, but just to know that like half these guys are not going to make it through your program, even if they're good prospects, it's a little crazy because you think they would stay at a place like Florida. But it's not just about who you're bringing in through recruiting anymore. Some schools, Ole Miss, you think about, they lean heavily on the transfer portal. I think I featured LSU in that section about SEC roster construction, where they have 26 total transfers on their roster. 16 of them were brought in this past cycle. And part of the reason I think is twofold. I think LSU had a disappointing season last year, so there's pressure to make a move. And they had a disappointing haul in the portal last year. They felt like people felt like they weren't aggressive. Where did two of the Florida Gator players that left that got significant playing time over the last couple of years, Jakeem Jackson, Jack Pyburn really came on down the stretch. They're playing at LSU. So there are two of those 16 players that are playing over there. Oklahoma did something similar where they went heavy into the portal this cycle. And you see something emerge where either schools that don't keep up with elite recruiting lean heavier on the portal, or schools that maybe need to make a statement, like in LSU, like in Oklahoma this year. Oklahoma brought in John Mateer, for those of you who aren't aware, very solid quarterback from Washington State. His offensive coordinator is in Norman now, so they brought him in. So he's running the same offense he ran at Washington State in Norman. Oklahoma did not have remotely SEC level quarterback play last year. They were terrible on offense, and they still found ways to win games down the stretch. Not as many as Oklahoma's used to. Obviously, tougher SEC schedule probably is part of it, but their wide receiver core was decimated last year, so it'll be interesting to see can they bounce back, and if they bounce back, like LSU, if they bounce back and they're competing for a championship, Do they then revert back to primarily high school recruiting? Because one program that's cooking right now is Texas. 92% of that Texas roster was built through high school recruiting, only 8% through the portal. So went through each SEC roster and have those numbers there for everybody, show the highs and lows throughout the league. And then also the ages of the roster too, what class they lean on. Most of the SEC, especially the more elite schools, almost like 65-35 or 60-40 slanted toward underclassmen on the roster. Vanderbilt, very heavily upperclassmen. Missouri's got a lot of upperclassmen. So some of the lower tier teams, Mississippi State, they have more upperclassmen, I believe, as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out on the field, Will. In some of those games, it's like you said, maybe Mississippi State is not going to be a team that brings it week in and week out, but maybe on the right Saturday, in the right situation, in the right environment, it's not going to be a thing where there's these totally hapless teams anymore. I think each Saturday is going to be even more of a battle than it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the SEC is going to be tough, no matter who you're playing and where you're playing them, and no matter who's on your roster. That's just sort of the way the conference is. There's been a pecking order certainly, but with Nick Saban leaving, I think there's open questions about DeBoer there. Obviously, Georgia had a run, but most runs. I mean, think about Urban Meyer's run for
Mhm.
national championships. That thing fell apart pretty quick. So there's potential for there to be Georgia still going in the opposite direction, especially if they can't find an answer at the quarterback position. I think, honestly, to me, like I've said this for years now, is that the job of a college football coach is to bring in elite talent because and to win, obviously to win games, but to bring in elite talent to generate hope. And so the takeaway that I have from the entire magazine is that Billy Napier, because he's brought in elite talent at the quarterback position, and because he's brought in enough talent in the transfer portal and through recruiting to supplement that elite play at the quarterback position, he should give us hope that this team is ready to make a run. And you can look at any team in the SEC and pick holes in them, and we do here in, in the magazine certainly. Florida has its holes too, and the question is going to be: Can Florida paper over those holes through the transfer portal? Can Florida paper over those holes by having better quarterback play than any of these other teams that are out there? Now, Napier has decided to build this program through continuity, and you have a bunch of numbers in here that point that out. But realistically, we have hope going into the year, and that's all I can ask for, right? All I can ask for from a program, from a coach, is that we have hope that things can get better. Now, look, maybe everything falls apart, and we're sitting here having the same argument we were last year, 4 or 5, 6 weeks in, and things look really bleak. But but I don't think so. I think by the time we get to November, Florida's going to be playing meaningful games, and there's a lot I can say about the magazine, but the thing I really want to say is the ethos of Read and Reaction has always been we want to help people be smarter fans. And if you read this magazine, I can't guarantee you're going to love everything in it, but I can guarantee that you will learn something that while you're watching the games this fall, you will go, I know why that happened. I know, or you'll be watching a game and you go, I know I've seen that play before. Or you'll look at it and you'll go, wow, they're not in that personnel package that they had all year long. Or you'll look at it and you'll say, Lagway's only completed 52% of his balls, but he's averaging 12 yards per attempt. I know why that's important. Or you'll look at the Florida defense and you'll go, they were in middle of the field open coverage. That's something that's interesting to see against this particular offense. So, no matter how hardcore X's and O's you are, or if you just want to be able to sit around the water cooler and talk a little bit about our Gators, our goal was to really try to teach through everything that we're writing here, and so hopefully that comes across as people go out and buy it and give it a read.
Yeah, and we have a blast writing it too. It's a lot of work and it certainly requires a lot of focus. And that's what like look and again, I made the joke at the beginning about disappearing for like the last 6 months here, but I don't want to do I don't want to not put the proper effort into the show either. So we kind of take that approach with everything we put out. We want to make sure we're putting good effort into everything we're doing. And so that's part of the reason is that like I would rather in those moments in the spring, I think we have higher value in putting extra time into the magazine. And we put every bit of that extra time into this. And, we're texting about it back and forth almost every day. And like Will said, even he's changing the order when we're a week away from delivery. And you know what? He was completely right about it. I did curse him still, but he was completely right about it. And we got it to a better place.
The
But
best part was you didn't change around the table of contents until I approved the order. You're like, I'm not
I'm not
changing that
touching
until
that
you
again.
do.
Yeah. Well, I'm not locking anything in until we're cool with that. But it's great because it's like there's a lot of things where I think both of us have enough respect for each other's work that, we really we joke about it, but there's really not much tension writing this. It's just fun because
Yeah.
we both again, I think the issue, like I joke about it, like putting together 72 pages of Florida Gator football content. It sounds like a chore, but we cut a lot. There's not there's plenty that there's a lot of Google Word docs that I have that are just sitting there that are unused that I'll probably try to, put out for an article here or there, but I have a blast writing this every year. This year was a little crazy. Will mentioned I think the 24 season was so interesting. It was a kind of a tale of two seasons with the defense, with Lagway, where I literally broke it down every single play in an Excel file so that I knew which quarterback was on the field for which play. But being able to do that, we were able to get super detailed in the stats on that. Um, Absolutely love do that. That took like a month to really lock in and do that really well. But it's worth every minute once we see the end result, and we have a great time doing it. So, like Will said at the beginning, readandreaction.com/mag to get access to both the digital and physical copy. The physical copy is on Amazon. If you just search 2025 Read and Reaction magazine, or Will, I even think if you do 2025 Florida Gators football preview, it pops up, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you can find it on Google, you can find it on Amazon,
Yeah,
but
it's
if you
not.
go to readreaction.com
If
slash
if
Mac,
you're
that's the
watching this
easiest way.
video, we'll have the links below it anyway. So
Well, there you
just
go.
make it easy for
Again,
everybody.
I want to make the appeal, right? Is that Read and Reaction started because my dad really didn't want me to call him and bitch about the Gators. And so he's like, you should really write about this stuff. And I wound up writing for a small publication called SEC Country as a freelancer. They went under. And so I started Read and Reaction. And so we've been doing pregame and postgame stuff for, geez, it's like 7 years now. And this right here, this magazine is sort of an outgrowth of that, but it's also the thing that allows me to put that kind of time and you to put that kind of time into the content that we have on the website. So if you like the website, if you like this show, and if you've subscribed, obviously like and subscribe the videos. We appreciate it. We understand not everybody has disposable income, and so we're not mad at you. But if you like the content, if you like what we have, if you like what we do, and the value that we provide you, please consider going over there, buying a copy of the magazine. Our goal, we announced it on this podcast last year, and I think Nick Nick almost fell over in his chair when I did. Our goal is to eventually have these sorts of magazines for every college football program that's out there. Like that's our growth strategy is to try to do that and proving it in the Florida grounds where it's the most rabid fan base there is and it's the program we know the best and proving that we can do that here is sort of that first step. So if you all are willing to help us take those steps, we'd appreciate it. readandreaction.com/MAG. Order on Amazon or a digital copy over there.
I thank God we didn't make that choice this year and have Nico on the magazine for Tennessee because that would have been a brutal switch with that timing. That would have been
Eh,
rough.
rewrite.
Rewrite the whole. That was rough. But
There are rumors about him in the playoff. We would have hedged.
yeah.
We would have put Heupel on there. We should have put Heupel like next to you on the cover. Be like, which one is the Tennessee coach?
Oh God, that's flattering. Appreciate that. Um, yeah, guys, Reading Reaction magazine. Go out and get it now. We'll stop making this a 30-minute commercial here, and we will get back to episodes here. I do see us kind of not being regular until a few weeks before kickoff with them because I know we're both kind of in and out with a few things this summer, but we'll be on more podcasts. I do want to shout out the High Top guys. The High Top guys made a special appearance as the super fans from SNL, and we will be on their podcast, I believe, next Wednesday. We're going
Yep.
to be on there. We got the super fans from SNL is the reference for anybody under the age of 35 probably at this point, right? Anybody under the look up the super fans on SNL.
YouTube exists. Come on.
You'll get the high top reference on it, but I thought Soderquist and Shelton they wrote an article in there with their picks for the season and Gators by a million, right? That's what they like to say over
Yeah.
there. They did a great job and we appreciate their contributions and we're looking forward to going on with them. So I think we got a few other shows we'll be popping around on, so keep an eye out for either Will or myself on a few of these shows, and we look forward to connecting with all of our fans. Please send us feedback. And in addition to leaving the reviews on Amazon with the 5-star reviews on Amazon, please send us some feedback too. Like you can, I'll put Will's email out there. It's Will at Read and Reaction if you want to reach out and if there's things you like, if there's things you don't, if there's things you wish we'd go deeper on, or if there's topics you even think we missed, we'd like to hear it because we do consider the feedback we get. We take it serious, and that's actually helped us improve each and every year. So we would really appreciate hearing from the people who buy this magazine, especially if you enjoy it but feel like we can do one or two things a little better. We'd love to hear from you. So Will, I'll give you the final word and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we're proud of the magazine and we're excited for the season. And those two things hopefully will motivate you all to go buy it, but also will motivate you all to cheer on this team in the swamp and make it really, really loud and help get them to the playoff. Because I think there's an opportunity to make a run this year. And, with Sapp and Banks back, you're not going to have that 2 years from now. So I get that we've got this 2 year run with Lagway, but we may be in a situation where, like Jaden Daniels a couple years ago with LSU, just their defense went bad right as the offense was unstoppable. You got timing has to be right. You got to cluster the right set of players at the right time, and Florida in 2025 has the potential to do that. We've highlighted a lot of that stuff in this magazine. Like I said, I can promise you're going to get information that you will look back on at the end of the year and say, "Huh, I saw some stuff there. That's pretty cool." So we hope you enjoy it. We hope you like it. Like you said, feel free to reach out and let us know if there's something you'd like us to do instead of this, but or additional to this, and we'll look into doing that as well. But it's been fun, man. It's always fun to put this together. Like you said, haven't been doing this podcast on a regular basis because we've been putting this thing together. So again, if you like this content, you should like that as well. We appreciate everybody who supports us out there.
2025 Read and Reaction magazine out on Amazon now or digital copy on readandreaction.com/mag. Email Will at Read and Reaction with any questions, comments, or whatever you'd like to say. Any type of feedback for the magazine, we certainly welcome it. For Will Miles, I'm Nick Knudsen. Have a great week, everybody, and go Gators.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to Stand Up and Holler. If you're interested in more information from me and Nick, you can go over to readandreaction.com. You can like and subscribe our YouTube channel here at Read and Reaction, or you can go to patreon.com/readandreaction to support us, get extra information, and we do Ask Anythings over there every once in a while as well. So check us out. Thanks for listening.